I didn't really find a lot of interest in that either. I loved my electives; those were my favorite classes. So we had a senior class called Team Games, where we had separate teams that we just competed. We did like 7-game wiffle ball tournaments, and so I excelled in PE. Okay, physical education and me just it was perfect. We had other classes. Anything that I thought I could relate to my life. So we had another class called Essentials of Living. And that was a class that I thought was really, really interesting. We learned everything from how to sew a button back onto a shirt, to how to do laundry, to how to fill out an application, to college, to how much it costs to rent out an apartment, what security deposits are. And I was like, this is great because I can apply every part of this to my life. And I thought those were really, really awesome classes. So again, below average student, and then my second semester of my senior year, I took an econ class, and it was required to graduate. It was the only business class that was offered, and Mr. Shriver was my teacher, and he just started talking, and I was like, yeah, of course that's right. Yeah, of course. And all of a sudden, I was the kid that had my hand up, which I didn't have in science or English or social studies. I never knew the answers. I didn't know what we were talking about or what Shakespeare was talking about. All of a sudden, we're sitting in econ class, and I'm like, yeah, that's obviously the demand curves to the right, and we're going to increase, so on and so forth. And all of a sudden, people were asking me for the answers, and I was like, oh, so this is what it's like in all the other classes for the last 3.5 years. Okay, I like this. This is much better. But one thing I will say, in high school, I don't ever remember, maybe they did and I wasn't paying attention, but nobody really ever asked me what I wanted to do, what I was good at, or how I could turn that into a business or a career. So hopefully throughout entrepreneurship and even personal finance, I know for sure, if you've ever listened to anything Mr. Webker has told you in personal finance, he has definitely asked you those questions. I have done my best to do that in Introduction to Business and entrepreneurship. Even if you still don't know, hopefully you've at least thought about it, explored something, and I'll tell you kind of my story and why I think that's so important. So I went to Fort Scott Community College down in the thriving metropolis of Fort Scott, Kansas, which is about an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half south of here. I got a free schooling. It was between there and Northwest Missouri State. I could have played baseball at either one of the places, but this was 100% free, and Northwest Missouri State was like $10,000 a year or something like that because it was out of state, even with a small scholarship. But baseball was pretty much a full-time job. I worked all the time at it. We had weights in the morning. We'd do pitching practice, if anybody's going to be a pitcher, pitching practice when you can't throw anymore because you can only throw a certain amount of pitches, a certain amount of days. Pitching practice just turns into running. So our pitching coach would literally just put us into the pickup truck, drive us 7 miles away, drop us off, and say, well, practice will be over when you guys make it back to the field. Awesome. Okay. Sounds great, Coach. Thanks. Really small classes at Fort Scott. That really helped me. I probably, especially with my stellar high school career, probably wasn't ready to go to someplace like KU or K-State. I might not have done very well, but this was pretty much like high school still. Small classes. You knew everybody there. I was in class with like 10 other baseball players in every one of my classes. So it was really good for me to go to community college. The bad part about it is I actually had to spend 5 years in college because I lost like 18 hours transferring from Fort Scott Community College to Kansas State University. So I do stress, hopefully, if you guys do end up transferring from one school to the other, please make sure you're actually taking classes that will transfer. Racquetball at Fort Scott Community College didn't transfer. It didn't make it. So I really wish I would have used that because it ended up costing me money later on. Although racquetball was a really fun class and I got an A in it, didn't transfer. So the one thing that I really did pick up at Fort Scott Community College was I actually learned how to write I had a really good English teacher, and we didn't really focus on, the curriculum didn't focus on reading as much as it really did writing. So we just wrote letters, professional letters and essays and so on and so forth. And my teacher really bought into the fact that writing was a skill that you were going to use for the rest of your life. And I bought into it too, and I became a much better writer through that class. And then public speaking, even though I'm doing it right now, it is something for my entire life that I've been absolutely petrified of. I've hated it, and luckily I was able to take a public speaking class. I think there was like 15 kids in my speech class, and they were all just as nervous as I was, so it was perfectly fine. I've heard other people that said their speech class at a big university is like 100, 150 people, something like that, and it's already kind of intimidating, so even worse if you have to do it in front of 150 people you don't know. Went to Kansas State as a second college. There was a couple colleges in between there, but anyway, had more success in the economics classes. Decided to become a business major because that was easy. It made sense. I understood what the professors were saying. I looked into accounting, finance, management, all that different type of stuff. I ended up going with marketing. To be completely honest with you, I wish I would have chose one of the other ones. Really, any of the other ones would have been great. But I chose marketing. At the time, it was kind of the easiest road to a degree for me, so ended up doing it. It was fine. But still, I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do with a marketing degree. I graduated from Kansas State University, and I had no idea what I was going to do with a marketing degree. And that's the thing that rather than focus on what your major is and exactly what you want to do, I just really think what you want to do with your life is more important than what degree you necessarily had. I've known people that are stockbrokers that got their degree in journalism. Okay, so you can do a number of different things, but just knowing what you want to do with your life. I probably should have, again, a lot of it was because of Fort Scott Community College and my racquetball credits not transferring and so on and so forth. But I ended up, after my 5th year, I was still 18 hours short of graduating. And so I really didn't want to stay another year. My roommate at the time was actually staying for one more semester to graduate, and I was really just kind of done with college. College is really fun, but only for a specific amount of time. And so I ended up taking 18 hours over 8 weeks over the summer, which was basically like wake up and start class at 7:30, you end class at 5:30 at night, and every teacher thinks that you have the only class at the time, so you end up writing like five-page papers between 6 o'clock and 2 in the morning, and reading about 6 different chapters and so on and so forth. It was probably one of the most difficult things I have ever done because I was basically a student for about 20 hours a day. I was a student. It was really, really hard, and it was the last night before I was going to take my last final in a class, and the final was at 7:30 in the morning, and I woke up at 7:50, and my alarm is blaring, and I had missed the final, and my heart started beating so fast. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss my final. Got up, ran across the street because I lived right across the street from it was Justin Hall, and so I ran right across North Manhattan Avenue, and I got there, and the room that I was supposed to take the final in was completely empty. And so, like, my heart actually stopped. And I ran straight to the professor's office, hoping that he'd give me some sort of extension, or I could take another test, or verbal, anything to get credit for the class, because you had to have credit for the final in order to pass the class, and I thought I had just screwed up college. He had a note on his door said, went back home. He lived in Denver, so he was on his way back to Denver, and see you next fall, or whatever it was. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I sent him an email. Luckily, he was very nice. He was a grad student. He was very nice. He actually emailed me my test, and allowed me to take the test, and it worked out. But yeah, really, really pretty scary situation there, especially after all the work that I put in over that 8 weeks. So after college, I started thinking, what would I like to do with my life? So I sat down, and I kind of didn't do anything for about 2 weeks, and I thought I could just kind of figure it out like that. And I went to a job fair, and at a job fair, I actually got a job with a fitness company, because again, I excelled at physical education. A fitness company sounds great. So I was in a high-pressure sales situation at a fitness company. I'm not going to name what the company was, but it was the most uncomfortable job that I've ever had. I'm a marketing student, so I fit with the sales. I know about business. I understand that. I have no real experience. I enjoy the fitness industry. I was like, this is going to be a good match. My boss was terrible. He basically said, if anybody comes in there, you give them a tour, and you get them to sign a contract. You do not let that person leave until they get a contract. And I was like, well, what happens if they want to leave and they don't sign a contract? I mean, like, I'm not going to force them to sign a contract. He said, you come and get me before you let them leave. And I was like, okay, all right, guy. This probably isn't for me. I don't want somebody signing up for a fitness membership that could financially, maybe they can't afford, or maybe they're not ready to commit to. I'm not going to sign them to a 2-year contract that it just doesn't work for them. So they didn't really understand I have a pretty simple philosophy, but it's a win-win-win philosophy. So whoever you're buying products from, they need to be profitable and they need to win. You as a business need to be profitable, need to be nice to people, have a good relationship with your vendor, and then your customers need to win as well. So your customers need to win, you need to win, and the people that you're buying your products from or your vendors need to win. So it's a 3-win system. And this guy really didn't care about the customer whatsoever, and I didn't think that was a very good way to do business. He didn't really care about his employees all that much either. He was really just a number hoping to get commissions. That didn't last very long. I think that was about a month that I decided that probably wasn't for me. I thought restaurant management might be the next avenue, so I went and got a job as a bartender and server at a restaurant, and I was going to kind of shadow, maybe get into assistant managing. After a month of working at a restaurant, I knew for certain that restaurant management was not for me. I didn't think that working 70 to 80 hours a week was something that I was really interested in. Every restaurant manager that I know works all day Friday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. Their day off's usually Monday, and then they have some sort of managerial meeting on Tuesday. So they work 6 days a week. They usually work 10 to 12-hour shifts. It's very, very competitive, and you're always on. There's not a lot of downtime in a restaurant. If you do have downtime in a restaurant, you probably need to start looking at other restaurants because your restaurant's going out of business most likely. So I didn't really like that aspect of the restaurant industry. I still worked there. I worked as a bartender and a server for a very long time, probably too long, but I loved that. I thought it was awesome. Best thing about the restaurant industry is when you're a server or a waitress or a hostess or a bartender, once you leave, you don't take anything with you. So you leave and your work's there. You don't take customers with you. You don't take food with you. You don't take any of the problems with you because every 45 minutes a new situation comes up. 2 more people come in to sit down and eat, whatever it is. So it's always changing, and I thought it was good. Made a lot of money in the restaurant industry too. I think there's a ton of money as long as you can look at it from a win-win-win aspect. You want the company to win, you want to win, and you want your customers to win as well. So as long as you're looking out for all 3, I think it's a really great place, especially while you guys are in college. Then I went out actually working at the restaurant. I got hired while I was working at the restaurant to go do international logistics. So I was bartending. This one guy came in. He owned his own business. We got to talk about what he did, and he started asking me questions, so on and so forth. We had a relationship going on for a few months, and he asked me if I would like to come and work for him. And so I said, yeah, let's do that. Let's try that. So we did international logistics. I did international logistics for about 2 years, which is importing and exporting. So I exported goods. So we have our largest account was Rawlings Sporting Goods. So I would take the yarn from Rhode Island, the little rubber cores from Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and then leather from Nashville, Tennessee. And I'd load up those containers. We'd send it on a ship, send it down to, I believe it was Panama at the time. They would manufacture the balls for Major League Baseball. And then Amy, who worked on the import side, would import those manufactured baseballs back into the United States to St. Louis, where they have their distribution facility for Rawlings Sporting Goods. So that was kind of cool to work with. But I was on the phone and sending emails for like 8 to 10 hours a day. I like interacting with people. I like moving around. I did not enjoy sitting in a cubicle for 8 to 10 hours a day and working on the computer. That kind of bummed me out quite a bit. So I decided that probably something that I should have done either in high school or in college. I want to go back and I want to get my teaching license. I really like the idea of teaching business, and I really like the idea of getting to coach some sort of sport. So I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I played baseball in college, so I thought maybe baseball. With that being said, just that decision to go back to school, that actually cost me $36,000 to figure out that decision. So not only did I kind of waste a couple of years there, which I don't look at it as wasting necessarily, but I did waste $36,000 because I already paid for my bachelor's degree, right? And all I did with this $36,000 was go get certification in something that I could have done at Kansas State University. So I basically threw away $36,000. Bonus, my wife did the same thing, so really we threw away $72,000. So we have that going for us. Yeah, so we get to double that number. And then when you go to student teach, it's like 10 weeks and you don't get paid. So that was probably maybe the second toughest work part of my life, because I had a mortgage, I had a car payment, I had student loan payment, and then I went to student teach where I wasn't going to get paid for 10 weeks. So I would student teach for basically 40 hours a week, and then I worked at the restaurant for 45 hours a week. They were really long weeks. And Mr. McNally had it really easy last semester because I just handed him folders of stuff that I wanted him to teach, and all the assignments and the worksheets and the PowerPoints and so on and so forth. My person was, his name was Mr. Jensen. He was like 64 years old. He was 1 year away from retiring, and I said, "Do you have any lesson plans, Mr. Jensen?" And he goes, "It's all right here, Coach. It's all right here." And I'm like, oh, crap. So I came up with every single worksheet, every lesson. I had to teach myself what we were doing before. I tried to explain it to a bunch of kids that I didn't know. That probably wasn't my greatest teaching semester. But anyway, it was a very, very long semester. So about me, I am a saver by nature. Who's a saver by nature? Is anybody a saver by nature? All right, a couple of you guys. My wife is a spender by nature. So I tell people who are spenders that they hate money, because whenever they get money, they try to get rid of it as soon as they possibly can. Okay, and that's my wife. I love her to death, but she is a spender. Okay, she hates money. I never liked being in debt to other people. I got that from my dad. My dad started his own business without any debt whatsoever. And now looking back at it, at the time I didn't really think much of it, but he was always preaching about it, talking about how he's going to pay this off, how he didn't want to take on debt to buy a car. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Okay, whatever, that's fine. But now I actually understand what he was talking about, because paying interest makes somebody else rich, right? If I'm paying interest to Mr. Webker's becoming wealthy because of that. I would rather be on the other end of it and use my money to go out and find other money friends and bring those friends back, right? I would rather collect interest to build wealth rather than pay interest and make somebody else rich. I've never liked the idea of renting someone else's property. That's just me. My parents have always owned a house. We've always lived in a house. We've never lived in an apartment complex before. I lived in an apartment complex in college for a couple years. It's just not as spacious as living in a house. The real thing that I wanted was, I've always been, I don't know why, I've always been fascinated with retirement. And I love the idea, even though I love working, I love the idea of not working. I don't know, it's just always appealed to me. So I like the idea of having some sort of income stream without really having to do anything whatsoever, which is how I got into my real estate business, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But working on the business and not in the business, you hear it on Shark Tank all the time. I've seen like every episode of Shark Tank multiple times. They say it all the time. So a little personal finance. This was my very first home. This is 91st and Schweitzer over in Overland Park. Bought it for $155,000. I had a $925 a month payment. I put it on a 30-year mortgage, and that was a phenomenal rate at the time. 5.875 was a phenomenal rate at the time. My parents, I remember when I got that, my parents were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe how good of an interest rate you got. Do you understand how lucky you are? Our first house, we were at 21% interest. And I was like, oh, 21? Are you serious? How big of a house did you buy? But yeah, so that was supposed to be really good. We'll see. That wasn't really all that good, looking back at it. Probably one of the best personal finance decisions I ever made. I worked at a restaurant, so I had a bunch of people that were my age. They might not have been savers by nature. They were probably more spenders. But I found 3 of them. This is a 4-bedroom house. I found 3 of them to pay me $400 a month in rent. So I had $1,200 a month coming in. My payment was only $925. So basically, I could live there for free if I wanted to. We split utilities 4 ways, so on top of that. With that money, I was able to start my Roth IRA and max that out for a couple years. I started an emergency fund. I made an extra payment on a house. Have you guys ever talked about making an extra payment on your house? If you have a 30-year mortgage and you make 13 payments in a year instead of 12, you can pay off your house 7 years early. So you can pay off a 30-year mortgage in 23 years if you make 1 extra payment a year. So that's what I started doing. That's what my finance teacher in college told me. So I was like, oh, that's a pretty cool idea. Yeah, let's do that. Let's get rid of our debt, right? Just like my dad always talked about. I lived in that house for about 4 or 5 years. Sold it for $162,000. So, oh yeah, this is the people on HGTV, they drive me nuts sometimes because they're always saying, yeah, I bought it for 150, I sold it for 200, so I made $50,000. It's really not the way it works. So if I sold it for 162, I purchased it for 155, I made 7, yes. But when you sell a house, you have realtor commissions, which is about 3%. And if you're the seller, you have to pay the buyer's realtor commission, which is another 3%. So that's basically 6%. Luckily, I had a friend who was willing to list it for 1% just because I asked him if he would have a reduced commission because we've known each other forever, and then you can make your 3% on the house that I buy. And he said, yeah, that sounds awesome. Let's do that. Okay. So instead of paying 6% on realtor commissions, I paid 4%. Closing costs about $3,000 plus. I put in a new furnace, I bought new gutters, a couple windows, a garage door. So actually I lost about $7,500. So that's probably what more of the real estate flips end up happening. But for 4 years, 3 roommates, I did bring in like $48,000 in rental income. So I did okay. I was pretty excited about that. Yeah. Anyway, we'll get to that. So then I had a life mistake. I went out and got married. Okay? It's a joke. It's supposed to be funny. It's okay to laugh. So when I got married, the roommates had to go. Well, that was like losing $1,200 a month. I was pretty sad about that. I kind of like that. And then I had this, my wife and I, we love each other very, very much. We always thought something else is better. There's more for us. There's a bigger house. We need a bigger house. Well, what do we need a bigger house for? We just lost 3 roommates. Why would we need a bigger house? We need a smaller house. We wanted this big walk-in closet and his and her sinks and bigger bedrooms and a formal dining room and a cul-de-sac and all these really great blah, 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 right? We thought that was just, we were going to find our forever house. Turns out that was probably one of the bigger mistakes that I could have kept this as a rental property. I could have, if I were still living in this house would be paid off by now, so I would have a house free and clear. Then I could go buy a dream house later. But really, living in a house for 4 years is a pretty bad investment decision. It's a pretty bad investment decision. My general rule, if I had to tell somebody, I would say if you're planning on buying a house, plan on living in that house for 10 years. And if you're planning on buying a car, plan on driving that car for at least 5 years, because I think you lose a lot of money if you're buying and selling cars all the time. You're paying all the taxes, all the realtors' commissions and closing costs. So again, I say for houses 10 years, for cars 5 years, and if you can live in them longer than that, do it. House number 2. This was the bigger and better house. So we went from I don't think I put it up there. 3-bed, 2.5 bath, which really there's a 4th bed in the basement, but you couldn't call it a bedroom. So 4-bed, 2.5 bath, 1,200 square foot house to a 5-bed, 3.5 bath, 3,100 square foot house. Again, there's only 2 of us, so I don't know why you need that much space. It's absolutely ridiculous. It was about $200,000. You see the payment went up significantly. It was like $400 more. Little better interest rate there, 5%. We had Mac. So Mac attack, so we have 2.5 people at this point. We had more expenses. This was on like an acre of land, so to cut it took all of Saturday. There were giant trees, which were awesome, but then you had to pay somebody like $700 to come trim them every other year. We had another furnace go out, but this furnace had to supply more heat to a bigger house, so it costs a lot more. There's all these, yeah, whatever, you guys can read. Kind of makes me upset just talking about it. So house 2 we sold for $225. Awesome, you made like $22,000. Well, okay. But then we had to pay realtor commissions again. That was $11,000. Closing costs $4,000. So yeah, we profited a little bit, but we had a big furnace. We had to replace the deck. We had foundation cracks. We had to replace carpet, tree trimming, sump pump. We actually ended up losing almost $13,000. Again, if we were still living there now, okay, that might have been all right, but we lived in this house for about 4 years. So the first house, 4 or 5 years, second house, 4 years. I still haven't hit my 10-year mark. And then I bought a third house. No, I did not paint the house to match my car, even though they are the same color. I didn't really realize that until I got the picture on there. House 3, we basically went back to whatever house 1 was. So all those realtor commissions and everything else, we're right back where we started for the most part. We bought this house for $175,000. We went on a 15-year mortgage instead of the 30-year mortgage. This is the first time that we ever did the 15-year mortgage, and I would absolutely, personal finance lesson, I would absolutely always, always, always buy your house on a 15-year mortgage. The amount of interest that you pay on a 15-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage is astronomical. It's a huge, huge difference. Now, you're probably going to say, but I can buy a bigger house on a 30-year mortgage than a 15-year mortgage. You're absolutely right. You absolutely can. But it'll take you longer to pay off, and you will pay so much more in interest. When you're paying interest, there are three things that really come up. Time, how long you borrow money for, the amount of money that you borrow, and the rate, how good your credit score is. Okay, so those three things determine the amount of interest that you're going to pay. When you can reduce the amount of time in half, it will save you tons and tons and tons of money. In Intro to Business, we do an assignment where you buy a $200,000 house on a 30-year mortgage. You pay over $200,000 in interest. You double the price of your house in interest. On a 15-year mortgage, I want to say it's somewhere around like $40,000 to $50,000. So over that 15 years, I would really like to save that $150,000 in interest, because that's basically what it comes down to. And you get a little bit better rate, and you just watch everything melt away. All right, I'm not going to get into it too much with this, but time, amount, and rate, absolutely 15-year mortgage. Then I'm going to start talking about the real estate business a little bit. So when I was doing international logistics, I was in a cubicle, and I overheard somebody else in a cubicle. Her name was Tony. I can't even remember her last name, but Tony worked over on the import side, and she had a duplex in Overland Park. And I had never really thought of owning a rental property or anything like that. And so I started asking her, tell me about this duplex. She said, all right, well, what ended up happening was about 15 years ago or 12 years ago, we ended up buying half of a duplex because somebody we knew was selling it, and it was a really good deal, and then we rented it out, and we put all of that money that this renter gave us, and we paid it off. And so we were cash flowing. We were just having profit come in, and then the people next door, you guys know how a duplex is. It's basically like two houses that are connected by a wall. So the other people put theirs up for sale, so we decided to buy that half of the duplex. So now we own a full duplex, and we take both of the rents from both sides and pay off this one, and we paid it off twice as fast. So now we have a free and clear duplex, and we want to go buy a vacation home at Lake of the Ozarks and have our duplexes pay for it. I was like, that is like the greatest business plan that I've ever heard in my life. So you don't do anything. You just use somebody else's money to build your wealth. She was like, that's a pretty simple way of putting it. But yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what we do. And for some reason, that idea, I remember that conversation, every single word of that conversation, I was just completely enthralled. Like, why isn't everybody doing this? This seems too easy. Why? What's the catch? It's like, no, there's no catch. But yeah, it's pretty easy. Just do it. There's a couple catches to it. But anyway, I had no real estate experience. I'm not a handyman. I had never developed a business plan necessarily before I purchased the first property. I've never developed a logo, a slogan, never really paid for marketing any more than a sign to put down in a yard. I have no company vehicle. I have no office. And I had never created a business before, so I just went to Google and said, how do I create an LLC? Because I knew that was the type of business that I wanted to start. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then created an articles of organization, because to open up a bank account with a business name, they ask for the articles of organization, which are basically who's in charge of the business, who makes the financial decisions, is there anybody else that can make financial decisions regarding this? If something happens to you, does it go to the next of kin, or if you die, what happens to, so on and so forth. So the bank needs all that information so they can know who can access the accounts. So I looked it up, figured it out, wrote it up, pretty easy. Then I came up with a 4-phase plan. So phase 1 was I wanted to buy 5 properties, and at the time I only had phase 1. I wanted to have 5 properties. I wanted to manage them myself, which means I was the landlord. I picked up the rent. I took the deposits. When the dishwasher didn't work, they called me. I either went out and fixed it or called somebody who was going to fix it, wrote them a check. When they didn't pay, I went and knocked on their door, asked them why they didn't pay, gave them the late fee. When they moved out and left all their stuff, I went and got all their stuff and stored it for 30 days and threw away all the trash and ripped up all the carpet. and did all that. That was basically everything that I was going to. I really didn't have any money to pay anybody else to do it. But I wanted to try to at least pay off 3 of them before I thought of doing anything else. And honestly, I thought 5 was probably going to be just about as many that I could possibly have. Phase 2 was, at some point, I'm not going to want to deal with picking up rent, dropping off this, or fixing a toilet, or doing whatever. So I was going to hire a property manager to do the daily operations. That cuts into the profit. They take 10% off of the top. So of that $48,000 I had for my roommates, if I had a property manager for that, they'd take $4,800, and I'd be left with whatever the difference is, $43,200, something like that. And then add a property every 5 years. Make sure to have at least 1 property paid off for every leveraged property or finance property. I've always thought that was really important. I've known many people who have went out, got 15 properties. They leveraged every one of those properties, and then things went wrong, and they ended up losing 5, 6, 7 of those properties. And so I never liked that aspect of it. Phase 3, continue to use the profits to continue to build. Also for retirement. I really want to play golf in retirement. I really want to be able to travel in retirement. I want to basically be able to do whatever I want to do. I don't want to be stuck in a tiny house and my wife and I are sharing a car and we don't get to go on vacation or live life very well or support the grandkids or take them to Disney World or whatever that is. I want to kind of be able to do a whole bunch of different things, and I think that this will allow me to do that. And then phase 4, it'd be really cool to leave these to Mac and Harper and then see if they can double the amount that I give them. I think that would, A, set them up for some pretty good financial success. But what do we need? So in order to start a rental business, you need a down payment in order to actually buy a property. Usually with any rental property, you're going to need at least 20% down. So luckily, from having those roommates and having that $48,000, which some I put into my Roth IRA, some I saved in an emergency fund, I was also able to put enough aside that I was able to get this down payment to get a loan. So I got that from number one. A good rental market. I have my properties in Franklin and Miami counties, and I did a ton of research. Before that, I asked real estate agents. I looked up rental values. I looked up housing values. I looked at cash flow returns. All that is basic general knowledge. It's all out there. You can look it up. But down in Ottawa, Paola, Gardner, Edgerton, Spring Hill, all those areas are fantastic. A fantastic rental market there. Gritton LLC, again, I looked it up on the internet. It costs $150. A good realtor. I've been through 6 realtors. Some people will take a key and they'll open up the door and they'll say, let me know when you want to write a contract. I don't want somebody that can do that. That doesn't seem like they're worth thousands of dollars in order to do that. So I usually fire those people. I want the ones that are out there finding deals for me, working on deals for me, negotiating good prices for me. If they're not willing to negotiate for $500, then I don't want them to represent me. I had one real estate agent, I think I was putting in an offer for like $100,000 and they were at $100,500 and they said, can't you just go at $100,500? Like, no, I can't. That's my $500. How dare you justify that I didn't work hard enough for my $500. I wanted it at $100,000, and I fired that person. We didn't get the property over $500 either, but that's okay. I didn't want that one anyway. Handyman, find a really trustworthy handyman. I've had probably 15 different handymen throughout the years. So some of them are crooks. Like Mr. Buckland talked about, a lot of them just don't show up when they say they're going to show up. So some of them have done crummy work. They haven't been called back. A lot of them just didn't show up or didn't do what they were supposed to do. Hey, will you replace 3 of these windows? They replaced 1, and then you don't hear from them for a week. Just show up and do what you're supposed to do. I'd be happy to write you a check for that. And then some sort of long-term plan, contingency plan. That was really where I got my contingency plan has always been, I want to limit the amount of debt that I have. So in case everybody just completely goes out of the housing market, the bottom falls out, there's no rental, nobody wants to rent anymore, I'm actually able to support all of the rental properties. I can pay the taxes, I can pay the insurance, and I can pay the mortgages on the ones that I have. If I had mortgages for every single one of the properties, I would not be able to do that. I really don't make that much money. So that was kind of my debt philosophy for it. The biggest thing is, and I think with entrepreneurial endeavors, you just have to have the guts to go out and do it. You have to be able to take the risk. And I was absolutely terrified when I was writing a contract for the very first house that I bought. It was a duplex. I call it the golf course duplex. I have nicknames for all the different rental properties, so I don't have to shout out the exact address for each one. So behind this property, there's a golf course. So the Ottawa Country Club is right back there. It's like hole 7 or 8, something back there. It's not really a country club, but they have a pool. So I bought this. This was out of foreclosure. It was like, I want to say $140,000. Yeah, $140,000. It was completely trashed on the inside. When I was writing up the contract for it, I was completely terrified because I was basically signing away $25,000 or $22,000. I forget what the down payment was. It'd be 20% of 140. So what's that? $24,000? $28,000. Is that right? Okay. So $28,000. I had to write a check, and writing a check to all, I considered those really good personal friends of mine, 28,000 personal friends I had to give to somebody else. So that was a difficult thing for me. Then I have a payment, right? I had a $720 payment. When I bought it, I didn't have any renters. I had no rental income, and all I knew is that I needed to put some money into it in order to get it rented out. So the only money that I've ever spent in marketing, I went and bought 2 signs, 4 rent signs. The very first thing, it was $300. They're really nice signs. And I put one on the left and one on the right. And then I started going every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I would go down there and fix them up. So I fixed up the one on the left side first. So I'd drive down on a Friday, rip up the carpet, start painting. Saturday, I slept there all weekend too. So I took a sleeping bag and I slept on the ground that had no carpet. It was disgusting, but it's fine. Go to the gas station, eat a piece of pizza or whatever they had there. Continue to paint, work on it. Sunday, same thing till dark. Came home, worked the next week, picked up appliances on Friday, drove them out there the next week, so on and so forth. Did that, got a renter for the left side. Then I started working on the right side. So it took me about a month and a half to get the whole thing fixed up, rented out. Everything was good. This property is probably my favorite property. Maybe it's because it's the first one. Maybe it's because it's on a golf course. I don't know. But I rent each side for $800. So it's 3 bedroom, 2 bath on the left side. There's no basement. There's no upstairs. And 3 bedroom, 3 bath on the right side. 2-car garage on each side as well. $800 a month. Annual revenue, so money coming in is $19,200. I have expenses for a mortgage. I pay property insurance in case somebody burns it down. I pay taxes to the county. I pay for repairs. I actually pay somebody to mow it. I was the lawn man for the first part, but I didn't really like doing that. So my expenses come to be about $17,000. I make $2,000 on this profit, assuming no major repairs. No furnaces need to be replaced. No roofs need to be replaced. So on and so forth. When I end up painting it every 7 years, it turns out to be about a wash. You're like, oh great, you do all that work for $2,000. Yeah, but I look at this number. I look at how much it would be worth per year if I didn't have the mortgage. So once that mortgage is paid off, all of a sudden this property turns into a $10,000 property per year. And I'm like, okay. And then you have 5 of them, and that's $50,000, and you guys see where it's going. Then this house sucks. This is called it's called the trashy house. That's what it's known as. So I didn't want to put trashy house on there, but it is a top and bottom duplex. It was built back in the 30s, and this investor came in. It was a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, staircase going right through the middle of the living room. And an investor came in, took the staircase out, created 2 separate entries up top. So up top there is a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment, and then at the bottom is a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment as well. So it's a house, and they have it separated. It's like 516 Oak Street, and the upstairs is 516 and a half Oak Street, which I always thought was kind of funny. But it's an older house. It's weird. I will probably own this house for the rest of my life. I'm pretty sure no other idiot's going to buy this house. I think I was the last idiot on that one. But I looked at it, and I was sitting there going, wow, my first property was $140,000. I got 2 units out of it. This property is only half as much. It's only $70,000. Now I'm going to have 4 rental units. I can pay that off twice as fast. I can use some of the money from the golf course property to pay off the trashy house. It didn't call it the trashy house at the time. Anyway, I thought it was really great. I thought it was going to be perfect. But what I didn't do is I didn't understand what the numbers were going to be for this property. I didn't really understand how much I was going to be able to generate revenue-wise. I based it off of a nicer, bigger unit rather than a smaller, older unit. And I didn't really do the research to find out what the other properties in the neighborhood were renting for. So my annual profit, again, it rents out for about 10 months a year, where the other place rents out for 12 months a year because it's harder to find tenants for it. It's harder to find qualified tenants, and I learned this because rent's only $500, $600 a month, so you are providing to a different clientele. That's not good nor bad, it's just different, and the credit ratings are different. So when I first started running credit for people that were trying to rent out a $500 place for their entire family, they weren't meeting my credit criteria. I didn't rent it out for like the first 6 months because I kept on denying everybody, and I had to go back and reevaluate and say, well, if they're looking to put a family of 4 in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment that is half of a house, they probably don't have a credit rating in the 750s, right? They probably just don't have it. So I had to kind of go back and reevaluate some of the ways that I looked for qualified tenants. I told you I don't like this property very much. It profits out at about $200, which in a 1930s property can go towards repair and maintenance pretty darn quick. But again, without the mortgage, once the mortgage is paid off, it'll profit about almost $4,000 a year. So just when you think, and I honestly thought, the golf course property is always very easy to rent out, very good tenants. I can find people in the 700, 800 credit ratings. And then a little different for this property, and I learned a lot about property management because I would go in and see, this is the actual picture of the property when I went to do a walkthrough with somebody. Granted, they didn't show up, shocker, right? But they absolutely said, don't worry about the Neapolitan ice cream tile, I didn't put that in. Every door was ripped off of the kitchen. There were no doors left on hinges. That was some sort of plaster. They had put a hole through the wall that they tried to fix, but they weren't very good at it. It was actually brand new carpet before they lived in it, so that's what it looked. I mean, it was just absolutely disgusting. Trash everywhere. Somebody had kicked in the door. I guess they forgot their key and didn't want to call the locksmith, and they just kicked their door in. And it all happens pretty quick. I was actually in this property 2 months prior, and it was immaculate. It was perfectly clean. So something went wrong very, very quickly. So my job was like, oh crap, here we go. It costs a lot of money. It costs about, I want to say about $5,000, but this is kind of what it ended up looking. This is actually the bottom half. Those were pictures of the top half. I didn't have any pictures of the bottom half, but this is what it looked like after we got it all pretty again. So we did redid the tub, we repainted all the cabinets, left the countertops, got new appliances, got new carpet, painted all the walls. Looks really nice. We are actually, when we went in and did the renovation, we got rid of the Neapolitan ice cream tiles upstairs. So we actually were able to rent it out for about $75 more on each top and bottom. So it's doing all right now. It needed a little work. Then I call this the flip house because I bought this in, what was it, maybe January 2007, with all the intentions. Does anybody know where we were in the business cycle in 2007? It was really great in January. It was awesome, okay? It was so great, yeah. Everybody was making money. Yeah, it was awesome. So I actually got this from a good real estate agent. He went out and found this property for $40,000. He said, Michael, I have a steal for you. This is too good to pass up. You can't wait more than a day. And I was like, all right, let's go. So I dropped everything, went out, looked at it. I was like, really? Only $40,000? How much do you think needs to be put in it? He said, probably about $30,000, and I think you could sell it for about $120,000. And I was like, well, that's a no-brainer. Let's do it. It really ended up costing about $40,000 to fix up. But still, you have $80,000 into something. You think you can sell it for $120,000. The problem was that it took so long to get it to where it needed to be. It was right around September of 2007, which was like the start of the Great Recession, where nobody had any money to really do anything. Nobody wanted to buy a house for sure. But we put a new roof on it. We painted the exterior. We did landscaping. We redid the drive. We put a new hot water heater in, a new furnace, a new air conditioner. We painted the entire inside. We redid all the flooring. We did brand new kitchen cabinets, brand new kitchen countertops, repainted all the trim, all the doors. It's a really nice house. It's a really nice house. We thought we were going to be able to sell it. So I waited until, gosh, I don't know. I think I waited like 4 months on the market. Crickets. Nobody even came and saw it. So we dropped the price by $10,000. Nobody came and saw it. Dropped the price by $10,000. Nobody came and saw it. And we were like, well, this just sucks, right? We're right in the middle of the recession. We can't sell this property. And I was like, oh, well, it's a good thing that I rent properties out. So I took one of those $300 signs and I put it down in front of the yard. And that day I was doing something inside. I'd literally put the sign down for maybe 5 minutes. People knock on the door. Hey, is this house for rent? And that was 2008? 2008. The same renters living there since 2008. So for the last 9 years, I put the sign out there for 5 minutes. So that sign is well worth $300. I put it out there, and I've had the same renters live there for the last 9 years, paying like $800 a month. Okay, awesome, unbelievable, unbelievable. It's probably even more profitable now than if I would have cashed out in 2007. So annual income is about $9,600, expenses $7,500. I profit about $2,000. The general rule is you kind of want to profit on a real estate property. You want to profit at least $100 a door. So if you have 2 doors on a rental unit, like a duplex, my first duplex, I have 2 doors. I want to make at least $200 a month. On this single-family house, I want to make at least $100 a month, just to cover any sort of extra thing that might happen. Any sort of, maybe it goes a month without being rented out. I'm going to have $1,200 saved up from the property to cover any of those, and it adds to your profit margin. So when I'm looking at houses, that's kind of, I have to make sure that I can rent it out for at least $100 over what my expenses are going to be. All right, so that I have the golf course, which is 2 properties. I have the trashy house, which is 2 more properties. I have the flip house, which is 5. And then, again, I told you I have a really good real estate agent now. So he found me 20 acres of land. So this is the 6th property of the rental business. Purchased it right in the middle of the recession, okay? And it was, again, one of those things where he called me and said, this is too good to be true. I don't know what to tell you. I think this property is worth like $80,000. This guy's losing it. He just needs enough money to pay off the bank so that he doesn't have to go through the foreclosure and possibly the bankruptcy process. So he went out and said, I think you should just write it up. And I think you probably won't be able to sell it for 2 years, but in 2 years, I think you'll be able to sell it, and I think you'll be able to double your money. And I said, well, you're right about the last one, except you can't predict the economy, so let's do it. And we did it, and 3 years later, I was able to sell it for $70,000. But the owner couldn't get financing for it, and I was like, well, you know what? I've heard that people that charge interest become wealthy, so let's try that. So I offered to be the bank for this person. So I'm the bank.
Can I still solve it real quick? I'm sorry.
Sure. So I am the bank for this buyer. So his name is actually Michael Jackson. I kid you not, his name is Michael Jackson. He bought this property, okay? And so he pays me $600 a month or whatever it comes out to be every single month, and I'm kind of really hoping that he just one day decides that he doesn't want to pay on it anymore, and then I can take my property back along with all of the interest and the payments that I've had. But I wish him all the great success in the world as well. But I'd be perfectly fine if that happened. He's not allowed to build on it. He can't really do anything on the property. I still do pay the property taxes just because I hold the note on it. I want to make sure that those property taxes are paid every single year, because if not, now we're to take back the property and then the county comes to me and says, hey, you owe $7,000 in back taxes. That'd be kind of a slap in the face. So we kind of work that into an escrow payment to go along with it. But the funniest thing about this is I've never seen the property ever in my life. I have no idea what it looks like. I'm not exactly sure where it is. It's somewhere between Ottawa and Prairie Star Ranch. But I have no idea. That's about as much as I know. I don't really know. It's close to the highway. It's close to I-35. I've never seen it before. I've paid other people to mow the yard before, but I don't know where it is. If somebody told me, hey, can you give me the address? No, I can't. I don't know where it is. I'm sure I could go through the documents and find out. I would probably just call my real estate agent and say, hey, can you drop a pin on the property and so I could get somebody to mow it. But yeah, I have no idea what it looks like. I heard there's a pond on it, but then somebody else told me there's not a pond on it, so whatever. Not really all that interested, to be completely honest with you. If I never ever have to see it, that's great. Brings in a lot of revenue. About $6,000 a year. Okay, I would say it's definitely the best purchase of the company. So far, best purchase. Yeah, especially because I haven't had to do anything. It's done. All right, so big deal. You make $6,000 on that, and you make $2,000 there, and you make $2,000 there, and you make $200 from the trashy house, and big deal, you maybe make like $10,000 per year. Yes, I do not make very much money from the rental business. Actually, since I started it in 2006, I've never taken a dollar from the rental business. So every single dollar that I have made, I have paid down debt with, plus I put more of my capital into paying down debt. Because what I want to do is pay down all of those debts, and instead of making $2,000, by the time I'm 60 years old and I want to retire, I want those to be generating $10,000. I don't want to be paying banks interest. I want people to be paying me interest. Okay? That's kind of the way that I look at it. I also like this aspect because if for any reason I were to lose my job or we go into a deep recession, I can always go back and do some of these things to increase the amount of money that I can increase the amount of money that I want to do. So I actually hired a property management company, which is my real estate agent, and I really like that aspect because my real estate agent makes money off of me buying and selling properties, right? You guys understand that? Okay. The property manager makes money when he rents out my property, so he makes a percentage of the rent that he draws in. So the more profitable my rental companies are, the more income that it generates, the more profit that it generates, the more money that I have to go out and buy more properties where he's the real estate agent, so he's going to make more commissions. And then once I buy that property, guess what? I'm going to hire him to do the property management, so he's going to make more money there, and we're all kind of tied in this thing together, right? So what's good for me is really good for him, and what's good for him is really good for me. And I like it from that aspect a whole bunch. But if I ever wanted to go back and do the dreaded property management role, I could do that and make another $4,000. I could probably cut all the grass for about $3,000 or $4,000. I could do all the painting and locks. I could change out locks and do minor plumbing and all sorts of stuff. So I would be able to probably make it through a recession if I decided that I wanted to do that and I were to lose my job for some reason. But over the last 11 years, I haven't taken any payment. I've always been just paying it down, reinvesting. So when I did this last year, or I guess, what was it, just last semester? Yeah, last semester. So on one of my loans, I paid down $2,000. So we still have 2 mortgages. So that means we own 4 properties free and clear. Paid down $2,000. I paid down $9,000 on this other one. So Dave Ramsey, I'm sure you guys have been through Dave Ramsey, the debt snowball. It says pay off your smallest debt first. So I'm making minimum payments on this. That's why it's dropping very slowly. And I'm just trying to pound this debt and get rid of it so we can use both payments on one, right? That's your basic debt snowball philosophy. When they're all paid off, we'll have equity in the business right around $400,000, which is great. Then we'll buy more property. So we have what's called leverage. Real estate owners and developers rely on leverage to increase the amount of potential return on investment properties. What that really means is, how can I borrow money from somebody, pay interest to somebody, and still make money? And that's really what you're doing. You're leveraging somebody else's money to make you more profitable. So if I waited to get $140,000 to buy that first golf course duplex, I'd still be waiting. I don't make enough money to set $10,000 aside every single year. I'd still be waiting. So I was able to use, and just like any of you can use money that you borrow to make more money, and that's really what leveraging comes out to be. I can use the bank's money in order to build equity on a property. So even if I were to just make the normal payments, I had one of my friends, he went out and bought 15 properties. He leveraged every single one of those properties, and he paid off every single one of those properties in 15 years. So currently, he has 15 paid off properties. And guess what he's doing now? He's finding 15 more properties to buy that he can pay for with the other 15 properties, and he can probably pay them off in about 7 years. Then he's going to have 30 properties, and he's going to probably go buy 15 or 30 more properties and use the first properties to pay off. He's leveraging the properties and the way that he borrows money to build wealth, which I think is very, very important. Interesting things that I have dealt with. I've seen more cockroaches than I am really interested in ever seeing in my entire life. Some people just don't live the same way that I've grown accustomed to. I've seen a couple snakes just from the simple aspect of people leaving stuff in yards, which creates places for snakes to hide. One of my tenants got shot. That was an interesting phone call. It was like a 4 a.m. phone call. His son actually had special needs, and there was some sort of something was going wrong in his head. I don't know if he wasn't taking his medicine or whatever, but he shot his dad in the leg, and his dad was my tenant. I've dealt with fleas for the first time. That was awful. Those are just, oh my gosh. I had to basically quarantine an entire place for 3 weeks. I wasn't allowed to have anybody go in or come out. I couldn't go in. I couldn't have painters go in. The pest control guy sprayed once. He said, don't open anything, turn everything off. Luckily, it was during the summer, and then he had to come back and do a second spray, and he said, now wait a week. So that was basically a month where I couldn't rent out my property. So that was a bummer, and plus fleas are disgusting. Domestic abuse, unfortunately, I reported that to the authorities because I've seen that before, that not firsthand, but when you go in, you see like fists that have gone through walls and doors are hanging off their hinges. It's something to definitely report. Break-in, theft. I always tell every single person that rents, you absolutely, absolutely, absolutely have to have your own renter's insurance, because my insurance does not cover all of the things that are inside of your house. And the same thing for you guys when you go next year to college. I don't know what the dorm philosophy is, but I would absolutely probably have renter's insurance. It costs like $10 or $15 to go get a renter's policy. You're probably going to have some sort of computer, a TV, clothes, whatever you have, a bunch of electronics, maybe your cell phone. You're going to have thousands and thousands of dollars worth of goods that are not covered if somebody breaks in. It's not going to be covered on your parents' anymore because you're not living at home, you're living in the apartment complex. I've seen places get broken into, and I've heard from people that don't have renter's insurance. Again, it's super, super cheap. Look into it. I want to say it's like 10 or 15 bucks, but if you live in an apartment or a house, you don't necessarily know who had that key before you. In a college town, you don't know if the landlord rekeyed the locks. You just don't know a lot. You don't know how easy it is to break a window and come in when you're at class or whatever may happen. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but have renter's insurance. Have renter's insurance because I've seen some really bad stuff happen. I was actually unable. This was the most ridiculous thing ever. So these people trashed the yard, and they had a whole bunch of, like, they had a sofa out there and a recliner and their kids' toys, and they're all just thrown everywhere. And I was in the middle of kicking them out, and I told them, you guys need to get rid of this stuff. This makes the neighborhood look crappy. So I actually hired somebody to go by and clean all the stuff out. So they brought their truck and trailer over, and they started putting everything, all the trash from the yard. I mean, this stuff was trash. It was garbage. They started putting it all in the truck and the trailer. Next thing I know, the cops called me and said, hey, Mr. Consiglio, this, that, and the other thing. Yeah, you can't get rid of their stuff without their permission. I was like, but it's trash. He goes, I know to you and me it probably is trash, but these are pretty prized possessions to these people. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the hoarding show, the show with the hoarders, but that's what it reminded me of. There's all this stuff, and the police told me that I wasn't allowed to clean up the property that I actually owned, which I thought was completely ridiculous. But on a good note, the city of Ottawa was allowed to send me a fine for all the trash that was in the yard. So I got that out of the deal, which was interesting. I've had to store tenant stuff for up to 30 days. So if they get evicted and they don't actually take their stuff, you legally have to store anything that has value for up to 30 days. So that's really good. Somebody's tried to pay me with a barbecue smoker before. It was a really nice barbecue smoker. I'm not in the business of smoking barbecue. I'm in the business of trying to collect rent to pay my mortgage with it. So I've seen the worst interior painters in the world. I tried to be really nice to these people one time, and I think they had the best intentions ever. So I said, okay, you can't pay rent. We need to repaint a unit. Would you be interested in repainting the unit? I'll basically credit you $500 for it. And they said, absolutely, we'd love to. Yeah. So I gave them the rollers, I gave them the paint, I gave them the tape, I gave them the drop cloths, everything. And they took the rollers and they rolled right over the electrical outlets and all of the light switches. They just painted right over everything. Oh my gosh, it was awful. Yeah. So yeah. Then this is probably this is weird, but we had some renters one time that I don't know how. They must have a pretty big family because they kept on telling me that their aunt died, then their grandma died, then their grandpa died, then their other grandma died, then their great uncle died, and that's why we don't have rent. It's going to be a couple days late, and this, that, and the other thing. And I basically came up with a new situation just for these people that said, all right, I'm not taking the anybody died excuse anymore. Like that it's over with, we're not doing it. Well, then I don't know if any of those people actually died, but then her dad really did die, and so she took a picture of him in the casket at the service and texted it to me. And I remember I opened it up and I just threw my phone. I was like, what just happened? It was the most ridiculous thing ever. I gave him an extension for that. I said, please don't ever text me any more pictures of deceased people. I'm not interested in that. They didn't live there very much longer after that. We kind of decided, once your lease is over, we're going to find you a new place to live. Yeah, it was strange. So I hired a property manager in 2015. So from 2006 to 2015, I did all of that. I dealt with the snakes and the roaches and the domestic abuse and the fines and the yards and the pictures of dead people and so on and so forth. All the calls at 2:30 in the morning that I can't do anything about. My toilet's still running and it's 2:30 in the morning. Okay, just turn the water off and then we'll call a plumber in the morning. What do you want me to do about it? Well, can you come out and fix it now? No, I can't come out and fix it now. Now, if it was some sort of emergency, we're in the middle of winter and your furnace stops working, okay, there are things we can do for that. But I was getting calls while I'm at football practice, while I'm out golfing, I'm, enjoying my vacation, and I'm sitting there dealing with the cops that won't allow us to throw trash away. Kind of a bummer on a vacation. Also, where the properties are, it's about an hour door to door. So it's an hour to go look at something and an hour to come back. So every single call or every single showing or every single time the contractor doesn't show up was 2 hours of my time. Every time I drove down to collect rent and they didn't have it and said, can you come back tomorrow? That was 4 hours of my time, right? And I just kind of got tired of dealing with that. I got tired of dealing with the tenants. I didn't have the ability. If I was going to do it all over again, I'd probably have properties. If I was going to manage them, I'd probably have properties that are a lot closer to me so that I could be on the grounds on like a weekly basis to make sure that they're keeping the property the way that I would want the property kept, that I was able to check in on them, that I was able to get to know them and deal in that win-win-win relationship the same way that my fitness industry boss did not treat things. But Mr. Wahlberg, he has a rental property, and he goes and mows it every single week. And I said, have you ever thought about hiring a property manager for it? He said, no, I absolutely love being on the property. Well, I hate mowing the yard is what he said. But I love being on the property every single week because I know if they're leaving trash out back or if they're not doing this or if this is something or they're not, the gutters need to be clean, then I know that all that stuff, I'm going to be on there. I'm going to say hi to them every week. I'm going to be there to pick up the check on the exact same, on the fourth Saturday of every single month, so on and so forth. And I think that's a much better approach to property management rather than having somebody just mail you a check or to be 2 hours away and say, oh, I can't meet you in 15 minutes. How's 3 days from now? So that was kind of where I said I really need to think about hiring a property manager. There was a point in 2015, which wasn't all that long ago, where I honestly I was managing all the properties, I was coaching football, I was coaching golf, I was working here full time, we had married with a kid, doing all that type of stuff, and I just wanted to sell every single property and not deal with any of it ever again. And that's when I actually decided, I think I should hire a property manager and see how that goes. So, moving forward, looking to buy a property basically every 5 years, 1 or 2 in the next 5 years. Where we are in the business cycle right now I'm not really interested in buying a property here, so I'm just kind of stockpiling cash right now, paying off debts and mortgages right now. Hopefully, when the housing market calms down a little bit, we'll look to buy another rental property. Would like to get to the point where I could pay off a property every 5 years. I could use those properties that are paid off to pay down a property or pay off a property every year, so I could buy 1, 2, 3, 4 properties. I'd like to have 10 of them and almost all of them paid off by the time I'm 55. I think that would be really awesome. I think at 55, that would give me the opportunity to retire if I wanted to. I could stop working here and probably just go play golf, maybe substitute teach 1 or 2 days a week or something like that. If I wanted to, maybe I wanted to teach for another 10 years, but it would give me different options. I'm not the only person that does this. Other people do it too. Mr. Buckland has a rental up in Atchison, so if you're going to Benedictine, you might want to talk to Mr. Buckland, see if he has a property for you. Mr. Wahlberg lived in a house over in Shawnee, and then they ended up buying a different house in Shawnee as their family expanded a little bit, so he rents out his first house. Mrs. McNally, who's over in the counseling office, she has about, her and her husband have about 15 or 20 different rentals, so they've been doing it for a while. A lot of them are in Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri. My brother, he has 1 rental property, and he actually flipped a property, and he was successful doing it too, which is pretty exciting. My friend Steve Sharp, he played professional baseball for the Oakland Athletics. He played baseball with Coach Buckland at the University of Iowa. He bought 1 condo, which is a 1-bedroom. Decided him and his wife wanted a second one, so they rented out the first one. Bought the second one, then they decided that they didn't want to, that they wanted to live in Lawrence, so they rent both of them out down in downtown, right off of the plaza, and they have a different condo that is out in Lawrence. So they I think they still have that. So they have 2 rental condos. Mr. Keith's uncle, he has like 20 plus rental properties, and what he does is something totally different, but he basically buys properties that need to be completely gutted. So whether they caught on fire, whether they got broken into, whether nobody else wanted them, whether they were completely trashed, he will go there and he will basically tear down almost every wall and all the drywall, all the plumbing, all the electrical, and then he'll build it up from just with the exterior from there. And he has about 20 plus rentals, and that's what he does full time. As an exit strategy, what would I like to do? Hopefully I never have to sell them. If I never have to sell them, that'd be a really good thing. They're not very liquid, especially the trashy house. I cannot convert that into cash very quickly. The rental properties will stay on the market for a little bit because a lot of people who want to get into rental property want to buy a really, really good deal. So what I think they're valued at versus what somebody else might want to value them at might be 2 different numbers. I'd love to give Mac and Harper 10 to 15 paid off properties whenever my time is to go. And if they could turn those into 30 by the time they were 30 years old, I think that could set them up for financial success. And then maybe they could give them to their kids who turn them into 60 and their kids who turn them into 120. Before you know it, we own a state or something like that. So if we have time, should we do questions?
Yeah.
I've been talking for a long time.
Maybe
So
follow-up questions on Friday.
do follow-up questions on Friday? You want to do it? We have 10 minutes.
Yeah, let's do questions.
You do questions?
Yeah.
Sorry, I get to talking. I apologize.
And you're afraid of public speaking?
Yes.
What's the sign look like?
Oh, it's marketing brilliance. So it's red and white. Just like that? Gotta have this. Huh? Yeah. $150. It's a very nice sign. It's a very nice sign. That's all it is. That's all it is.
That's all you need.
If I would have known before, I'm a fairly thrifty person. I'm always asking people for deals or how you can get something used or whatever. They apparently make any real estate agent that gets out or that gets out. It's not a prison, but you know what I'm saying. Anybody that has signs like these, now there are companies that just sell. They'll print off magnets, and so you could take your number and just put a magnet right over this. and you could probably buy my old sign for $20 instead of paying $150 to make a new one. That's what my brother-in-law is now in real estate. He works for Keller Williams, and he bought like 30 signs off of an older lady who was getting out of the real estate market. She was retiring, moving to Florida. Bought all her signs for like $300. So, yeah, probably should have done that. Didn't know that was a thing at the time.
It sounds like you have to do a lot of managing people. Do you enjoy that, or do you absolutely dread the managing people aspect of it?
I love managing people. It's a little different relationship than just managing people. Like sometimes at school, I'm just kind of managing you guys or managing a project that you're working on, so on and so forth. But you guys have the general desire to want to do something. Unfortunately, when you start managing a property, they might not necessarily have the desire to want to pick up their house or to keep their house clean or to make their payments on time. So it's fairly difficult. I've met some really great people and some awesome people who have been tenants before. And I've met some people that I really wish I'd never met before at the same time. So,
would you have considered having a property manager earlier on?
yes, but yes. So I thought about it the other day, and I'm a dork, so I go and I crunch numbers all the time. And when I first started doing it, I didn't think that I actually made enough money to hire somebody to give away 10%. I looked at it like, okay, I'm giving away 10% of my profits. But what I've noticed since my property manager does it, who does it for a living and is phenomenal at it, he manages over 120 different properties. He has a brokerage. He has 6 guys that works for him. He has a handyman person on site, on call, but that actually works for him, that reports to him. So he pays that person, employs that person. I looked at it now, and I'm certain that my properties, the business overall, is more profitable now with him running it than when I did it, even though I'm giving away 10% of my revenue. Because number one, all of the rent is always collected. Number two, the properties are kept up better, so there's less maintenance and repairs. Number three, and this is the biggest thing, when somebody moved out, if Brady was renting out one of my apartments and he moved out, I would say, okay, he moves out on a Tuesday, we do a walkthrough. The next weekend I go down there, maybe I need to put a coat of paint on it. Then the weekend after that I have a showing, but I can't go down Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday because I have football practice after school, so on and so forth. So it would be 2, 3, sometimes even 4 weeks before I got another tenant in there, whereas my real estate agent, my property manager, it's like 2 days, 3 days. They move out. He has guys already lined up to go and paint it. He's having people show it. He can show a different property that's the exact same layout as the one before that he also manages. So it's painted the same color. It's designed the same. It has the same kind of appliances in there. So he's actually shown a different property as my property, and they signed a lease just knowing that that's what it was going to look like. So instead of a 3-week turnaround or a 4-week turnaround, he's done it in 2 or 3 days, which, gosh, got another $800 in rent. So $800 probably pays to manage the whole property for a whole year or something pretty close to that, if I answered your question. Yeah, I should have done it a long time ago.
Did you know your property manager, or did you just...
Yes, he was originally my real estate agent, and then he owns probably 40 properties free and clear on his own, and then he also he got hooked up with this doctor wanted to invest like $300,000, heard rental property was a good thing to do. So he went out and he bought 6 units or something like that, and asked him if he would manage those as well. So then he had his own 40 plus another 6. Then his friend went and bought 10, and his friend went and bought 5. And then I asked him to manage my 6, and all of a sudden he was like, yeah, let's do a property management. Let's do that. So now he also does financing too. So he's basically going to be, all in all, kind of like a one-man shop eventually. Mr. Barber, you guys know Barber Financial, kind of the same type of thing. They created a whole bunch of their own businesses. They started with just investment advice, and then they'd say, well, who do you suggest for insurance? And so he'd suggest Zurich Insurance Company. And then all of a sudden he sat there and was going, why am I referring everybody over to these insurance companies? Why don't I just start another branch of Barber Insurance? So he did that, and then everybody was saying, well, who do you use for an accountant? So now they have Barber Accounting. So basically, there's Barber Financial, Barber Accounting, there's probably a Barber Law Firm now. I mean, all the different aspects that you'd want to utilize, from investings to trust funds to wills and all that sort of stuff, they handle in-house. So it allowed them to kind of do the same thing, very similar to what the real estate agent did.
Do you still make 15 payments a year on these properties too?
I don't have that. I'm not that strict on it. Just when I have extra money, I always want to make sure I have my emergency money in there. So I always try to keep like $10,000 just in case something really bad goes on. And that actually happened about a year and a half ago. Like, every single property was empty and vacant at the same time, and we had to go in and replace every single stitch of carpet. Every wall needed to be painted. Every piece of linoleum needed to be replaced. So I ended up I probably spent like $10,000 on repairs within like 2 months on these properties without any money coming in while they were being repaired. So it's a good thing that I had that. But I'm not very strict about, just when I have extra money, anything that goes over $10,000, I'll just throw that at the smaller one of my mortgages.
Do you suggest getting a Roth IRA even though you probably won't max it out for a couple
Yes.
years?
Absolutely, yes. If you can throw $50 in there, throw $50 in there. If you can do $25 a month, do $25 a month. If you can make it up to $100 a month, make it up to $100 a month. You don't necessarily have to put $458.33 in every month to max it out. It's encouraged, but you don't have to. I would say time and amount, if you can start when you're young to invest for Roth IRAs and 401ks, that's going to pay the biggest dividend over pouring a whole bunch of money into it later in life. You guys want to see the property that I really want to buy?
Yes.
Yeah, this is exciting. So this is a quadplex, and I know you're sitting there going like, "That's Mr. Consiglio, that's like $750,000." I know. And I showed it to my wife. She goes, "You're crazy." And I said, "I know. But this is the one that I really want." So this is 4 units, 3 bedrooms in each unit. So I believe it's 3 bedroom, 2 bath in each unit. This is why I want it. That's great. That looks pretty. But this is why I want it right here. So it generates $53,000 in income, only $13,000 of expenses with a property manager, so it nets out $40,400. So I'm looking at that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's almost my salary. Like, I could replace St. James with this. This would be awesome. Now, granted, I would have to pump all of this money into the mortgages for probably the next 30 years, but I'm not that old, so I could pay it off by the time I wanted to go play golf. So yeah. That's so I did a little cost analysis on it, and I said, okay, if I had $100,000 to put down on it, anytime that you want, this is going to take longer than I thought, but you guys know what the stock market returns on average? 10%, 9.5, right? So if I pumped $100,000 into this property, how much should I expect to return as profit? $9,500, right? Because if I were to invest that in the stock market, that's what I'd expect to come out of there. So I basically did a cost analysis on it. Turns out I'm willing to pay about $535,000 on the property, so we're a little far away from each other right now. I'll call them back in a recession. Thank you guys for listening.